Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. My name is Sloan Fremont, and this is a podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Dr. Garbelli, author of the book, The Doctor's Future, a blueprint for future-proofing your profession and for healthcare decision makers leading the evolution of AI robotics-powered medicine. This book is like a sophisticated stethoscope pressed onto the chest of a system approaching cardiac arrest, listening for the heartbeat of human care beneath the noise of machines, bureaucracy, and innovation. It's not just a diagnosis, it's a resuscitation plan. So Dr. Garbelli, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you, Sloan.
So let's start out by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and how you came to write your book.
Well, the idea came a few years ago when I started noticing lots of products based on AI appearing on the market. And I started asking questions to the vendors to understand what kind of preparation they had made for us doctors to be able to adopt these technologies and use them safely. And I realized that a lot of times they didn't have any answers. So I became more and more curious. I started doing research, and I started realizing how exposed and vulnerable the whole profession was going to be if we did not prepare for these technologies.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little background? You've been a doctor for how many years now?
Oh, over 25 years.
25 years. Okay. And what is your specialty, or what area do you practice in?
I'm a specialist in acute internal medicine, which I think in your country is called being a hospitalist, if I'm not mistaken.
Uh-huh. Okay, good. So your book introduces the concept of Healthcare Convergence Framework. Can you briefly tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, basically, I wanted to go beyond just writing a book with ideas. I decided through writing this book to organize the ideas, the proposals about how to assess the readiness of the organization and how to guide the adoption and implementation of AI robotics in any healthcare organization. So I created this 8 pillars framework called the Healthcare Convergence Framework to support any organization and healthcare leaders adopting AI safely.
Okay. And were you finding are most other facilities, do they have any level of readiness, or is this all new for most of the facilities? I think I know the answer, but
well, yeah, the landscape is very fragmented. There are some hospitals that, by all means, are quite advanced internationally. There are some local hospitals that have started lots of pilots and are using AI robotics, maybe in different departments. They have a sandbox approach. They keep it safe in a limited area. They're testing it. But nearly no organization has done a comprehensive work to assess all the possible complications and adopt a strong governance system. And also, in the book, I explored what is going to potentially happen, not just now with the existing technologies, but in the future, when we are going to be working alongside an intelligence that surpasses human intelligence. And I started asking myself questions. How do you work with this super intelligent non-human being? How do you interface? How the team dynamics are going to change, the relationship with the patient, and beyond that, when AI will be interfaced directly with the brain, how will that affect the identity of the doctor, the approach of the patient, and so on. So I went a few steps ahead compared to what we can do right now.
Yeah, because as you're talking about like readiness and governance and all those things, I mean, all that stuff has to be thought about when you're implementing this stuff. Can you give us some examples of some of the ways AI and or robotics are implemented in facilities, maybe some common ways
Mhm.
that that's being used now?
But the most common is supporting taking notes.
Okay.
We call it a scribe technology or ambient technology. It's basically the equivalent of a Alexa
Mm-hmm.
device that listens and produces notes that then become part of the patient record. There are also technologies adopted by radiology departments that support in identifying abnormal scans and speed up the reporting process or add another safety layer. So it's like having two two radiologists checking the same scan, making sure
Right.
that we're not missing out things. Um, there are in robotics, I don't know if you might have seen some funny pictures of nurse robots or care robots on the internet, but the most common use at the moment is in surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And the robots are currently mostly guided by humans, but um, we need to be aware that they are being trained on the data to eventually become independent.
Yeah, and so going back to your examples, the note taking one, I know that one just from some previous project work I've done in my own career that note taking is such a um, hard thing for physicians and nursing and everybody. And so with the note taking that you're seeing, with the ability to have AI take those notes, is is that something, does the customer or the patient, I guess, get input into that, whether AI is used in their care or even in their, when you mentioned robotics and surgery, is the patient able to have any sort of insight or say into that, or is that driven more by hospital policies?
It's usually driven by hospital policies, but like for everything, there is always an option to opt out. It depends very much how this is advertised.
Hmm.
And we have become so anesthetized to a lot of technology being present and listening all the time.
Right.
We accept that there are cameras everywhere and it's okay to have them. And in some countries, you have to put a notice somewhere on the wall that says, or on the street that says, there's a CCTV. And that's it. You don't need to get any further consent. And eventually, I believe these technologies will fall into the background so much that we will not even notice they're
Mm.
there. But how safely they are implemented and chosen poses a lot of questions. For example,
Right.
something that has been very well developed and it probably cost a fair amount of money will have a technology that is in a local server, might not be sharing data with a data center far, far away. But there are a lot of products that are based uh, on technology that is freely available, and it's not always clear where the data goes, how safe
Mm.
it is to share all of that.
Right. Yeah. So many considerations, especially again, you talk about governance and those starting out and all these things to consider. I want to move to another part of your book where you talk about how physicians must regain their seat at the strategy table. You talk about in your book how so many healthcare reforms are designed really without the physicians in mind. I do have experienced this in my past. I've done work with hospitals and tried to help with process improvement and so forth. And this was years ago before AI, but that was something I saw all the time. And I would argue for on behalf of the physician that the processes are not designed for the physician. They're having to accommodate their processes around the system. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how you feel like maybe AI and the future of robotics and so forth might be able to assist physicians with that more?
I'm so glad to hear that you get it because it's not very common knowledge. I think a lot of people see us physicians as empowered people, as professionals that have control of our own profession. But the reality very often is the opposite, as I mentioned. we are not always consulted when big decisions are taken. And I dedicated uh, a whole book to this topic. My first book was called The Doctor's Voice, and I elaborated on different aspects of the importance of why it is essential, also for the organization, for the good functioning of the organization, to have physicians' input in every decision making. But if anything, just because we are at the front line, we see and notice a lot of things, and we very quickly can pick up when something is about to go wrong or could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding AI, I think it's the same level of problem. If we are consulted at the end, when decisions have already been made, the product has been chosen, the contract has been made, it might be too late to then get in touch with the clinical team and understand, oops, there are a lot of problems that we did not foresee. It
Right.
can be a very costly mistake to make.
I agree with you completely. I've seen this so many times in the project work I've done. Again, not even AI related necessarily. This is a problem, seems like over the years, that I've seen, and I know it's just been an ongoing thing. So I agree with you completely that anybody who's going to be interacting with anything new always should have a voice in what that system is going to do. I remember in the work that I did, I used to go into the hospitals, and there was a doctor who I shadowed for several days, and in order to switch screens, this is such a simple thing, but this just goes to illustrate the point you're making. And maybe
Mhm.
people aren't familiar with these kinds of things, but in order to switch screens, this doctor had to tap a button on his desk every time in order to switch screens. He couldn't just move his mouse to the other screen. He had to tap a button. And I remember I simply could not believe that. And I went back in my report and wrote that up, that simple little thing. These people need the ability to move their mouse across two screens. Like it's not, these simple things that still weren't being done. And I still remember that one to this day.
Yeah, the type of discomfort and substandard equipment that we have to deal with in healthcare is sometimes shocking to the public.
Yes.
We all carry very powerful, very up-to-date devices in our pockets every day. And then we go to a hospital or a primary care doctor that has a computer that is 8 to 10 years old, struggling to keep
Yes.
up with all the updates, all the programs that have been installed. It's a very different world, and sometimes it makes no sense that we do not apply the same criteria that we do with our or personal devices to what we use
Right.
at work.
Right. I agree with you. I think that, and so I love that you had that part in your book that you called that out, because that again is so important. When you were writing your book, what was one of your favorite parts of the book to write?
Hmm. The one I had a lot of fun writing was the doomsday scenario,
Mm,
thinking what is the worst thing that can happen when AI goes rogue? And I wrote three different sub-chapters into that chapter. So going from a mild form of dysfunction to AI turning against humanity and trying to eliminate us. Something that we all are familiar with science fiction, we've seen movies, we read books. Years ago, it was a remote possibility, but now we hear more and more reports of how the current types of AI, the current models, do not have a moral compass, do not have an ethical thinking, do not always prioritize human well-being and human life over anything else. And there is a big concern that when this goes unnoticed and algorithms start running the organization or running data processing in the background, we might not be able to notice some subtle dysfunctions. So I'm raising the flag now in advance.
yes. Yes, and that brings up an interesting point. So does AI have an ethical code to follow similar to a doctor?
The way it has been built, it doesn't. It has
Interesting.
learned from general human behavior, all the good and the bad. If you look at how every AI model currently mostly tries to please people, um, there is no guarantee that it's going to act in your best interest. I
Hmm.
remember reading a while ago when I think it was ChatGPT that had a problem, was involved in a suicide case.
Yes.
And it was a big scandal. They did some testing and they realized that the percentage of correct responses, acceptable responses, was low, was around 67%, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, so they brought in a lot of experts and a lot of mental health experts and psychiatrists to change the model and try to implement retrospectively in ethical behavior and awareness of when a person should not be supported in the way they're thinking, but they should be advised to get in touch with
Right.
a professional. And the rate improved to 97% after that intervention.
Mm.
But the concern was if a million people every day ask ChatGPT about killing themselves, 3% of a million is still unacceptable. It
Yes.
might look good in the numbers, but it's not something that we would accept with any medical device. We wouldn't start using a drug that kills 3% of the patients, would we?
Right, right. Wow. Yes, that is, this is such a fascinating topic. Unfortunately, we're coming up to the end of our time. My guest today has been Dr. Garbelli, author of the book, The Doctor's Future, a blueprint for future-proofing your profession and for healthcare decision makers leading the evolution of AI robotics-powered medicine. So before we close today, Dr. Garbelli, what do you hope readers learn or take away after reading your book?
To prepare for the adoption, safe adoption of AI robotics in healthcare, we need to work together. It's not just as doctors in isolation. And that's why I chose to call the framework Healthcare Convergence Framework, because multiple agencies need to converge towards this task and work in unison.
Yes. Well, again, Dr. Garbelli, thank you for joining us. This is such a fascinating topic, and I just really love the the concept that you've brought forth here in your book. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You can find more about the book, The Doctor's Future, a blueprint for future-proofing your profession and for healthcare decision makers leading the evolution of AI and robotics-powered medicine on Amazon. And I'll link to the book in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.